After another blowout, embarrassing loss to the Miami Dolphins, the Falcons, they are frauds.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So today we are talking about the Falcons' 34-10 loss to the Miami Dolphins in Week 8, talking about their fraudulence, talking about Kirk Cousins being the ultimate teammate and saying, I spit in the face of your quarterback controversy. And we'll also be talking about why we won't be talking about firing the coaches on this week's pod, or probably for the next several weeks pods here on Locked On Falcons. But for those of you that don't know me, I am your very humble hater, Mr. Drew. Sirius Black, the Jolly Green Giant, the iron that sharpens the iron, aka Aaron Freeman, very illustrious host of this Locked On Falcons podcast, been covering this Falcons team for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that are everydayers of this pod. That means you make this pod your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer, guys, is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it's available. I love days like this. The negativity, the hater gets to come out today, and I get to sit here and be like, oh, this team is so bad. Yes. But the Falcons are absolutely fraudulent, right? Thought this would be a back to basics game plan for the Falcons after some of the struggles they had in the 49ers game. Hey, you're going up against the worst run defense in the NFL. Run the football, give the ball to Bijan Robinson, especially Michael Penix is out, Drake London is out. Simple. Get back to basics. Go out there and just, run for 200 yards like we saw this team do earlier in the season. Get this running game back to, square one, and let's get out of here. Even if it's got to be an ugly 17-13 or whatever win against this Dolphins team, just get the W and let's get this show, right this ship, and get back. And the Falcons couldn't even do that. Right, they got absolutely destroyed in this game. Couldn't run the football offensively. Couldn't get anything going offensively in this game. And defensively, they got exposed by the Miami Dolphins. It's one thing to get exposed by the San Francisco 49ers, right, and Kyle Shanahan and all that stuff. It's another thing to get exposed by Mr. Mike McDaniel, who was on the hot seat talking about with Locked On Dolphins, Kyle Krabs, like, oh, he's, we're on, Mike McDaniel firing watch. We're just counting down the days until Mike McDaniel gets fired. Well, as usual, you have your get-right game against the Atlanta Falcons. Don't anybody ever come for me when I sit here and talk about the Atlanta Falcons being the team that you get right against ever again. I mean, y'all get so mad at me when I talk about this every single week on these crossover podcasts, and yet the Falcons just, once again, they're doing such an incredible job. They prove me right every single week, right? This defense is fraudulent after that Bills game, right? Now the defense was the lesser of two evils, despite giving up 34 points in this game, because the offense and special teams, were not putting them in positive situations in the first half of this game. But, when they needed to get stops in the second half, they weren't doing that. So it's still, at the end of the day, defense is a fraud. They had that great game against the Bills. They've come back down to earth since then. And, we wondered, hey, this Bills game is going to be the proof of whether or not this defense is actually good. And, they proved it, right? Against the Bills. They shut down the Bills. And ever since then, it's just been falling back down to earth. So, we thought it was going to be, that was the game that was going to start their fall back down to earth, and gravity was going to hit. But unfortunately, it's been the last 2 weeks. So finally, gravity is hit, and this defense is absolutely fraudulent. But, the Dolphins just looked at the 49ers formula. We talked about it throughout the week, right? Run the football on offense, quick passing game, and you can stop, this defense is not that imposing because they can't stop the run and they can't get pressure without blitzing. And you can destroy the blitz with a quick passing game. And then on defense, if you can dial up some blitzes, this offense doesn't really have answers for blitzes, right? That's a play calling issue, right? And then if you can stop the run, as the Dolphins did in this game, what else is Zach Robinson going to throw at you? Because we talked about it. He had some answers in the Washington game. He had some answers in that Bills game. Hasn't really had any answers outside of being able to run the football in pretty much any other game. And this was one of those games. Was once the Dolphins were able to stop the run, it became nothing for this Falcons offense. So let's start with the defense before we get into the offense, because we got to talk about Kirk Cousins being the consummate teammate. But Dolphins ran for 141 yards. Tua was 20 of 26, 4 touchdowns in this game. You look at the next gen stats, 3.7 yards per attempt according to next gen. In air yards, the lowest of Tua's career since 2021. Fastest average time to throw in the 2025 season, according to Next Gen Stats, of 2.37 seconds, and on throws of under 2.5 seconds in terms of time to throw. He was 14 of 17, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. So Jeff Ulbricht's going to have to figure it out, because quick game is absolutely annihilating this defense the last 2 weeks. So you got to play press man coverage, but can you play press man coverage? You can do it with AJ Terrell. Can you do it with Mike Hughes? And so, I remember, we won't get into it, but this is why cornerback to me remains the team's biggest need on their roster. But we'll talk about that in the offseason. But defense has injuries. No Diablo today, no Jalen Walker, no Billy Bowman, no Zach Harrison. And they lose Jesse Bates early in the fourth quarter due to an ankle injury. We'll see what the severity of that injury is going to be. But that potentially could be even further devastation. But losing starters is merely an excuse. Most teams in the NFL have lost multiple starters. I mean, the 49ers lost 2 Hall of Famers last week, weren't playing without them, and they found ways to get the most out of that defense and find a way to win. And that's what you're supposed to do. There's no excuses. The injuries only go so far, right? It's going to hurt your defense, but you got to figure out something. So we got to see this defense step up. They haven't done so since that Bills game. And we'll be waiting another week to see if they do it next week on the road against the New England Patriots. But I'm not looking particularly optimistic at this point in time. So, we declared them a legit good defense 2 weeks ago. Well, we're back to square one, where they were outstanding to start the year, but this defense has not shown up the last 2 weeks. But enough about the Falcons defense and their fraudulence. Let's talk about that fraudulent offense. But we got to dust off the Kirk Cousins chaos meter if we're going to talk about the performance of the Falcons' consummate backup quarterback, Kirk Cousins, on today's episode. And Kirk said, quarterback controversy, don't worry about that. And we'll break that down as we get into the rest of today's Locked On Falcons. So today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, a daily fantasy app where making the right call actually pays off. Since we make decisions every day, Prize Picks is going to allow us that when we're right on those decisions, we can actually cash in. It's easy to play on Prize Picks. All you got to do is pick more or less on up to 6-player stat projections. And the beauty of Prize Picks is just you versus the protection. You don't have to worry about if thousands of others pick, over or more or less on a particular projection. Don't worry about it. As long as it wins, you get the cash in. And so if you want to take advantage of this great opportunity to, exercise your ability to be right, all you got to do is download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. And today's episode is brought to you by Rougiet, right? I know we're all tired of the Falcons making excuses for their poor performance, and you are tired of all the excuses when it comes to poor performances in the bedroom, right? Making excuses doesn't really solve anything. We've heard them all before. It's stress, I'm tired, this never happened to me, but it happens to everybody sometimes. But, when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little bit of extra support. And that's where Rougiet comes in with the fast-acting doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiet makes it easy to get started. You can just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. And if you're prescribed, your treatments ship directly, discreetly straight to your door. So visit Rougiet.com at RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNFL so that they know we sent you. Rougiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. So, guys, we are dusting off the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, right? We've been using the Penix pump meter all season long, but the Kirk Cousins chaos meter that was bequeathed to us from Locked On Vikings, Luke Braun last year, we used it all throughout, or at least the first 14 games of last season. And, it's been so long since I've seen the chaos meter that I actually forgot how it goes. But for those of you, there's 5 levels that we came up with a chaos meter. Originally it was 4. We added a 5th level. And level 1 is the lowest level where you have conservative Kirk Cousins, right? Level 2, Kirk is a solid game manager. Level 3 is peak Kirk, where you just introduce that little bit of chaos, combine it with the game manager, and you get the peak version of Kirk. And then level 4 is it's going into the red. It's too much chaos. And then we added a 5th level where it's like, we've reached the point where it's time to turn the page for Michael Penix. That's what we used last year. And to me, this performance, we're dusting off level 5. This was a level 5 performance. This was peak. This was, not peak Kirk, but this was peak level 5, right? Because there was concerns about, a quarterback. What happens if, Penix coming off a rough game against the 49ers, Kirk comes in, he leads the Falcons to a victory, right? Is there going to be a quarterback controversy, right? But Kirk said, no, man, I got my guy, Michael Penix. I'm going to go out there and lay a stinker. I'm going to go out there and not be able to perform. This team started this game 0 for 9, I believe, on third downs in this game, or 0 for 7 or whatever it was. Ultimately, I think they were like 2 for 11 in this game. They could not convert a third down. They could not run the football. They could not complete a pass other than a check down in this game. And Kirk Cousins out here being peak quarterback too. He said, I'm going to fall on this grenade for Michael Penix. There's not going to be a quarterback controversy here because I'm going to out and just go lay a stinker. And this team is going to be a stinker, and people are going to be clamoring for Michael Penix to come back. Please, Michael, come and save our season. No even conversation about it. And of course, we know, again, I'm being sarcastic for those of you not picking up on it, but there was never really a quarterback controversy because we knew it was going to be Penix all along. He needs the reps. It's pretty basic when it comes to that. But again, Kirk's just showing the elite leadership that Kirk Cousins can only bring to the table, leaving no doubt on whose job it should be and whose job it is currently. So I appreciate you, Kirk. I also appreciate you, Kirk, because any talk of Kirk, balling out and leading to a possible late trade or whatever, drumming up trade talk that we'd spend the next week or two talking about before the trade deadline, I believe on November 4th or 5th or whenever it is dead. And of course, Kirk, we've been talking about it on this podcast since March. There was not going to be a Kirk Cousins trade. And so Kirk being the ultimate everydayer. Appreciate you, Kirk. Appreciate you. We don't have to sit here and waste any more time about any knucklehead Falcon fans, Falcon media, Falcon podcasters, Falcon YouTubers talking about some stupid, never going to happen Kirk Cousins trade. Kirk, I appreciate you, man. You are doing so much for my agendas right now. And then my other agenda that I've been pushing for years and years is this Falcons offensive line is overrated, baby. That has nothing to do with Kirk Cousins, right? Because we didn't see a run game today. You love to see it, man. They're just the Falcons just doing everything to live up to all the terrible things I say about this football team, all the hating I do on a daily and weekly basis, all season long. I live for these games, guys. I live for these moments, just hating, just it makes my teeth white, just smiling all day. Yes, we love to see it. No run game. And again, vanilla gameplay. You can sit there and be like, oh, Zach Robinson had the most basic vanilla game plan and he needs to make adjustments. And you be 100% right. But you're going up against the worst run defense in the NFL. You should be able to win with a basic game plan if you're actually a good team. And we found out today that the Falcons are not a good team. So I appreciate the Falcons. I don't have to waste any more time the rest of this calendar year sitting here pretending that the Atlanta Falcons are a good football team. You have taken so much stress off of my back right now. And it goes back to something Raheem said last week after they lost to the 49ers. He said the 49ers out Atlanta us. He used Atlanta as a verb, meaning that we were the physical team, right? The 49ers out physical the Falcons. That's what he meant by Atlanta, right? The more physical team. So you want to earn that? You want to use the name of this city as a verb, Raheem, right? You got to go out there and earn that, my guy. You got out physical by the Miami Dolphins. They out Atlanta. They out Miami Jew. They out San Francisco Jew. You can't use that term. And again, there's no shade at the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta deserves better than what this product is on the football field. But you had the audacity, Raheem. I love it. I love it. To use Atlanta as a verb to mean going out there and punching another team in the mouth and winning in the trenches. And we're back to classic Falcons football. where they're getting pushed around in the trenches by one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. And you gotta love to see it. The fraudulence, we got to come up with a fraudulent meter, right? It's spiked, right? If there's only 5 levels to the fraudulent meter, the Falcons are level 100, right? They've gone Super Saiyan level 69 or whatever it is, whatever they're up to on whatever that Dragon Ball Z nonsense is, whatever season they're on, GT Super, whatever, I don't know, Beerus, whatever, whoever they're fighting or whatever, the power levels over 9,000. Again, I'm out of analogies, guys. I'm out of metaphors, right? It's just, this is, and if they can't run the ball against the Dolphins, then good luck doing it against the Patriots, right? They're a top 3 run defense going into this week. The Dolphins were a bottom 3 run defense going into this week. You got averaging 1.4 yards per carry in the first half. Oh boy, it's going to be fun. But, a lot of this criticism is going to lead a lot of people to being like, when are we going to fire Raheem Morris? When are we going to fire Zach Robinson? And I'm here to tell you guys, at least we'll see, probably not to the end of the season, but we're not going to spend that much time talking about firing coaches, because that's not really what the season is about. It's not about what coach is going to magically come in and save the Atlanta Falcons, but we're going to break down what we are going to be looking forward to, if anything, for the rest of the season. And it's really all going to be about Michael Penix, and we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. With the NFL season being back, that FOMO feeling of being able to get into the stadium and boo your favorite franchise team. I'm talking to the Falcon fans. Okay, if you're any other team, to get into the stadium and cheer your favorite Falcon team, Game Time is going to allow you a no-hassle experience to cheer on your team or boo your team if you happen to be in the state of Georgia, right? It's going to give the advantage back to the fans, right? The price you see is the price you pay. What you see is what you get, not with the Falcons, but with Game Time. They're going to give you that opportunity that the Falcons will never give you, right? Because you get the panoramic sea view. So you can line up the perfect spot where you can sit there and watch Raheem Morris patrol up the sideline and boo him, right? It's the perfect opportunity. The Game Time is going to give you that opportunity. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. With the NFL season going strong, but guess what? The NBA season is back, and there's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you missed the start of a game, you want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel is going to make live bets, available for everything from who's going to score next to any potential fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine those live bets in the same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Bet a little, win a lot. That's what the beauty of the same game parlay. And if you're, feeling, particularly optimistic about the Atlanta Hawks' chance of winning the NBA Finals, they got 31 odds. So, hey, throw a couple bucks on there and see, what's what come April, May, and June if you're feeling frisky. So, FanDuel's going to keep it all exciting for you. So right now they're giving you $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play with FanDuel and download the app, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, the reason why we're not going to talk about firing coaches, because ultimately there's almost certainly at this point in time in the offseason, or in the regular season, I'm sorry, there's not going to be any firings, right? Again, 3-4 is not going to lead to Arthur Blank. I don't think it's going to lead to Arthur Blank firing. We've only seen Arthur Blank fire a coach after an 0-5 start. And whatnot. Now, maybe Raheem decides that he's going to fire some more assistants, similar to what he did after that embarrassing loss to Carolina earlier this season, and hope that sparks some turnaround. But in terms of the top down, we're talking about Arthur Blank deciding to part ways with Raheem Morris, or, again, I don't think Raheem's going to fire Zach Robinson. Now, if the Falcons go on like a 4 or 5 game losing streak, then I think we can have a legit conversation about whether or not it may be time to part ways with, Raheem Morris or Zach Robinson at that point in time. But for me, I've said it all along, the coaches are going to be evaluated at the end of the year, as they should be, right? And the reality is, like, if you fire, let's say you fire Zach Robinson, who's going to come in and save the season? There's no other experienced play callers on your team. The only person on your offensive coaching staff that has experience calling plays in the NFL is Ken Zampese, your senior offensive assistant, and he was a pretty awful play caller when he had that opportunity. If you're sitting here holding out hope that TJ Yates is going to come in with no play calling experience and suddenly transform this team right away into a top 5 offense, again, you're more than welcome to have that belief, but there's absolutely no reason for you to have that belief. So I don't sit here and think that firing Zach Robinson really accomplishes anything. I don't think firing Raheem Morris accomplishes anything, right? You're going to, plug Jeff Ulbrich into the interim head coach position. That went so well last time. Like who's going to be the guy that's going to take over as the Falcons head coach that's going to come in and go on this 4 or 5 game, win streak the Falcons need to get on to get their season back on track, right? Because, when we talk about the coaches being evaluated at the end of the year, that's what we're talking about. There's 3 outcomes for this coaching. Going into the season, there were 3 outcomes, and that becomes now clear. Let's spell it out now that we're midway through the season, right? There are 3 outcomes that allow this coaching staff to come back next year in 2026, right? 1, you make the playoffs. 2, you have a winning record if you don't make the playoffs. Or 3, you can sell ownership that you are the right staff to develop the young quarterback in Michael Penix. That, disrupting that continuity would be a mistake. Now, playoffs, technically the Falcons are still mathematically in it, but, they're probably like the 12th seed at this point. They were 11th seed going into the weekend in the NFC. And I would imagine after this loss, they're probably falling in that regard. So playoffs, again, like I said, unless the Falcons can go on like a 4 or 5 game win streak, and they'll probably have to get to now 10 or 11 wins to even have a shot at making the playoffs at this point in time. That's pretty much that ship has sailed. But technically, mathematically, they're not eliminated. Winning record, again, similar kind of conversation. Like 9-8 is going to be easier to get to than 10 or 11 wins. But again, unless you're going to go on a 3 or 4 game win streak at some point over the next 4 to 6 games, it's going to be really hard for you to make up ground to be able to be in a position to have a winning record by year's end, right? Because you basically what you would have to go 6-4 the rest of the way. Is my math right? Yeah. So we'll see if the Falcons can do that. But really, at this point, the only salvation you have if you're Raheem Morris and your coaching staff is that you can fix Michael Penix, right? That you can sit there and go to ownership and say, hey, Michael Penix was playing outstanding down the stretch, right? Again, this is all hypothetical because we're not there yet, and probably at this rate, probably won't be there. So again, I understand why people are very skeptical of this. But this is really your most realistic outcome, that if you can maybe get this team to like 8-9, you maybe win like 4 out of your last 6 games. This offense is humming, looking like the top 5, top 10 offense that we all hyped it up to be going into the season in terms of their ceiling, that you do at some point reach that ceiling at some point in December of this year. And you can say to ownership, hey, look, it took us a while. It took us longer. We got off to a slow start, which again, is going to be a conversation next summer when we talk about the preseason. It ain't going away, guys. But we got off to a slow start, but we finished strong. Bring us back. And, Arthur Blank's going to have to sit there and say, well, I did this. I feel like I've done this before. This is deja vu about that 2019 sort of 2020 season. But again, that will cross that bridge if and when we get to it. That's the only selling point that you have as a coaching staff, which is why, like I sit here, why we're not going to be sitting here talking about firing the coach, because if you're Raheem Morris, you need Zach Robinson and Michael Penix to be able to marry themselves together. You're not going to get another opportunity to hire another offensive coordinator. I know people have had these dreams of, we'll keep Raheem and then we'll hire Mike McDaniel. You're not going to give Raheem another opportunity unless one of these things happen, right? Where you need Zach Robinson to come through for you at the end. They are attached at the hip, ladies and gentlemen. It's Raheem, it's Zach, it's Michael Penix. Now, Michael Penix is not, hopefully we're not going to be having that conversation, but Michael Penix is hopefully not going anywhere, because we know how much of this team's success long-term is based around their ability to develop Michael Penix. But if you're Raheem, if you're Zach Robinson, and we're sitting here at the end of the season and we don't feel good about your ability to develop Michael Penix, and currently we don't feel good about that, so something's got to give in the back half of the season, then you're not going to be out of a job. And so this hypothetical, like, let's go out and hire Mike McDaniel or some other new offensive coordinator to come in and take over for Zach Robinson is always been BS. It's always been BS. It's even more BS than, after today's performance. So this is really about Zach, Raheem. Can you save your jobs by getting Michael Penix to play like a top quarterback? So we will see if Penix can finish the season red hot. But that's why we're not going to spend really that much time talking about firing coaches on a week-to-week basis. Again, if you want to sit there and spend your time talking about that, that's not what we're really talking. Really, what this season is now really boiling down to, it's a Michael Penix. Where's Michael Penix's development at? It's an evaluation year for Michael Penix, and see where his development is at. What are the things that he's good at? How do we build a successful offense around Michael Penix, as well as some of these other young pieces, right? The defensive pieces, the defensive components, these young talent, who are foundational pieces, who are going to be the guys that are going to be cornerstone pieces for this defense for years to come. And if we don't have enough of those guys, you got to go out there and add those pieces, on the defensive side this offseason. So it's really about become a season of, who are the good young players that we can build around for the long term? Who are, how many, did Terry Fontenot, because he's on the way out, did he leave the cupboard bare, right? Or how stocked is this cupboard? How many canned goods do we have? Is that cream of mushroom soup in the back, right? Which nobody wants? Or is this going to be a situation where we're talking about, some good canned goods in the back, right? If you're following the cupboard stocked metaphor, you know what I'm saying? You got some things that you can, cook up something in the future. So that's kind of where we're at, or at least that's where I'm at when it comes to what this season is about. It's just really about evaluating these young players and see who are going to be cornerstone pieces. Again, I know everybody else is going to sit here and convince themselves over the next 2 months that there's going to be some head coach, some offensive coordinator that's just going to magically come in and immediately turn. This team is actually secretly one of a playoff team, and we just got to get the right play caller. We got to get the right head coach that can motivate this team, and we'll show. And it's been a lie. It's always been a lie. I continue to insist that it's a lie. They just went out there and got their butts kicked by the Miami Dolphins, ladies and gentlemen. And y'all want to sit here and pretend that this team is secretly a playoff team? Get out of here with that nonsense. So that is going to do it for us here on this podcast. I appreciate you guys allowing me to go on this rant. We will continue talking about this godforsaken football team, this fraudulent football team. We get to watch them 2 weeks on the road and see, if, hey, maybe this is the week. They actually show up on the road for once, or is this the beginning of, an epic 3-game downturn against the Patriots and Colts? So continue to check out Locked On Falcons as part of your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, if you want to get the scoop on what happened elsewhere in the NFL, all right, if you want to hear about some non-fraudulent teams or maybe a couple of fraudulent teams elsewhere in the NFL, Locked On NFL is going to have you covered. 2 shows daily to get you all the biggest stories around the NFL. Tyler Rowland, that shot of espresso in the morning. Tony Wiggins, head on over to the barbershop for some real talk. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.